welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews and to a reading vlog here on the channel. Now, I know what I said a couple of weeks ago, and I'm not bringing back the reading vlog in its traditional form just yet. I'm not quite ready for it, but I appreciate everyone who said they really enjoyed those. So we're doing something similar. Right, basically, I need to do a reread of The Age of Madness trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. This is his latest series, and the third book, The Wisdom of Crowds, is coming out on the 14th. Today it is the 7th? Yes. So I have 7 days to finish this series and get a video up and running, which I'm very excited about, and this is going to be that video. And I could have done a very traditional book review for this, but my thinking is that spoiler-free videos for third books in series, no. We're going to read through the 3 books in the series, and we're going to have a good time, and I'm going to check in the plan, which obviously is going to go perfectly well and will not go awry at all, is to read about a third and then do a check-in of each book. So in theory you should have about 9 check-ins from me. Hope that's going to be okay. I'll try not to blither on for too much. The astute among you will notice that I have only been holding up one copy of the book. That is because that is the only one I own in physical form. I have a digital copy of A Little Hatred and a digital review copy that's been sent to me for free of The Wisdom of Crowds. Regardless of where book come from, nobody's paying me to talk about books. I'm pretty sure this hard copy was a free review copy as well. But I'm not being paid to talk about this, and I have actually purchased myself a copy of the first one in hardback, which has cost me a little bit more than the recommended retail price because Smart Judith didn't buy it originally. Would it have been more cost efficient to donate or trade this copy and then replace everything with paperbacks as and when they came out? Probably. Not what I've done though. I vaguely mentioned spoilers. I will let you know which chunk of the books up to which chapter I'm talking about, so you can actually read along with this if you'd like. I thought that might be something fun you might want to do. I've actually read the first third, 34% of A Little Hatred already, because I do not yet know what chapter that amounts to because I'm reading off a review copy. I will insert that in a lovely little box at the bottom of the screen, and I will put timers in the description if I remember, and all of the above. I have read these a number of times. I think I've now read the first 2, I've read the first one twice and the second one once. I think that's where I'm at, and I really enjoyed them both times. The first time that I read the first one, I hadn't actually read the First Law trilogy, which I don't have up here with me. So the first time I read it, I was kind of like, oh, this is interesting. I think it was probably my first Joe Abercrombie book I'd ever read. I might have tried to read the First Law before and then failed. At the time, I sort of said, well, I don't think you really need to read the original trilogy to read this. It's probably fine. You're probably missing out on some stuff, but broadly speaking, it's still a good story. And I stand by that. That's still how I felt at the time. But having now read First Law, I do think you get a better reading experience reading them all, and I don't think that this book does enough different that it could be, well, you'll love this even if you didn't like the First Law and didn't get on with it. I think you have to be on board for Joe Abercrombie's writing style and the way he does characters and the stuff that happens in his books. He's a grimdark, obviously, but our setting is the same as the First Law trilogy, but some years later, and basically we're at the Industrial Revolution coming in, and I really, really enjoyed that because, as we know, the Industrial Revolution was high time for horrible people doing horrible things. I'm not saying there wasn't some positives out of it as well, but broadly speaking, let's follow the money. Some characters who are involved in the money-making thing of that. So we have Savine, who is Glotka's daughter, and she is, trying to make as much money as possible and come out on top and generally be fabulous and, a little bit villainous and have a great time. And then we have other plot threads that are happening in the north where war is breaking out again, and I did highlight a quote because I really thought it was good. War is when a fight gets so big almost no one comes out of it well. And I thought that was pretty accurate. One of the things I really like about Joe Abercrombie is you'll get a lot of perspectives from different sides of the conflict. Even in the case of the Industrial Revolution, sort of the people with all the money versus the people who are working in the mills and such things and having their land and their jobs taken away for the Industrial Revolution. You get all the sides of the conflict, and you're simultaneously, it's really wonderful, you're simultaneously rooting for these quite evil characters because often they're quite charismatic. My battery's going to die, we'll go quickly. Often they're quite charismatic, and also you feel awful for these people who are in the situations that are a direct result of the bad people. I'm enjoying it. The scene has basically been set. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, that big stuff goes down in the next 2/3 because that's the rest of the book. Okay, so my plan is to finish this today, it is the 7th, and then do kind of 2/3 a day for the rest of the week, and then I can be done by the weekend, get this edited, get this uploaded, and you're watching it now. So if you're watching it, that means I've succeeded. I'm going to go so I can open up all my windows again because it is rather warm, and I shall speak to you next time. Hello, book 1 arrived, yay! I probably should have waited to vlog until later today, but yay, I'm very excited about this. We have read from The Lion and the Wolf starts up to the end of part 2, the start of part 3, because that seemed like a sensible place to stop, and it's roughly 2/3 of the way through. I am actually just reading this on my Kindle because I prefer the speed of page turning not holding me back. So yes, we're 2/3 of the way in. How are things going? Can this go here? Perfect. I still really enjoy this book. I'm finding it a lot of fun. Still a lot of the same things apply. Essentially, I've just read part 2, and part 2 is, in my opinion, where things really get started, because it's a lot of everything that has been set up in the first half kind of collapsing, or the flame catches the tinder, in some ways very literally, in part 2, but we haven't quite got to like unending battle scenes yet. I can't quite remember how much battle scene is in this one, so we'll see in part 3 if that's all we get. But yeah, there's a lot of characters suddenly being put in terrible places, and I left my Kindle over there and I had some quotes. Hang on. Oh, here we go. So this is Savine, our in the first part, very powerful, high up, not very nice, but you know, she knows what she wants and she goes out and gets it, lady. And in this second part, obviously, things have gone quite badly for her so far. She has been on the wrong end of an uprising, shall we say, and now she is in hiding. So this is her reflecting on that, and it's, while she fared whimpering through the city on the day of the uprising, she had sworn to a god she did not believe in that she would be good if it meant she could live. Now she was happy to be evil if it meant she could be clean. I really like that as a quote, kind of summing up her character, and I like that Joe Abercrombie writes these scenarios where the expected thing to do is have this character have to live in poverty for the first time ever and have to experience the hardship that she has been putting people through by running her business. And it should be like Undercover Boss, and she's like, I never realised you had life this hard. Oh, how terrible. But actually, that life doesn't really work that way. That's a storytelling-y thing. And even in this story, we have Savine going, you know what, I still hate this. This has really confirmed to me that I do not want to be poor. I want to make my money. I want to have my money. I want to be gone from this, which I don't know. I wouldn't say like I like it, because she's not a likable character. That's kind of the point. But it is just that thing of like, yeah, that is a choice you can make. And especially I think her making female characters make that decision, I just find that interesting. And a lot of the kind of like romance in the biggest inverted commas in the world, because I don't think Joe Abercrombie really writes romance. I think he writes people hooking up, and sometimes they also develop feelings for each other. That's all happening and being, I don't know, I think interesting. I really like Rika as a character for how she just sort of says it like it is. Like, that's kind of her thing. She's very blunt. She's very unapologetic in a lot of ways. In some ways, she's still quite anxious and not introverted, but sort of outside of everything. But she is very, very blunt with Leo, who is a bit of a prat. So that's fun. There's a lot of princes and people in heir to power are prats in this, which I enjoy. So yeah, I'm going to keep going with this later, possibly even this evening. If it gets to nighttime, you won't see me till tomorrow, where hopefully it will be a little bit less boiling warm. I'm having a great time with this book. I'm having a great time. I would say I'm having a great time with this series, but we're really still on book 1, so I'll talk to you soon. Back at it again. Here it is. I've been talking about so many books, they're just sort of piling up over here. Sorry, She Who Became the Sun. It is done. It is complete in just over a day, which is pretty good going. I'm going to talk about from the start of part 3 all the way to the end. If you haven't got there yet, please don't spoil yourself. I cannot stress this enough. This will ruin the book for you unless you read the first Lord trilogy, and it still ruined the book for you, but less so. So we have all of the fun of discovering you've accidentally been doing incest. Justine talks about this as like watching a car crash in slow motion, and she's 100% right. Follow Justine, by the way. She's great. It does certainly feel that way, and I think it's really interesting. Again, I was talking about earlier, I think, the kind of duality of this character that you're somehow rooting for and also think is a terrible person. And in this case, yeah, really rooting for her romance, or her to not be sad about her romance and also be like, but you are capitalist and bad. Complicated feelings about Savine, suffice to say. I was thinking this morning about how one of the things I really like about this book is a lot of the main characters are young people. They are not young adults in the sense of being like 17 to 19, maybe early 20s. I think they're probably mid to late 20s is my guess. I'm not actually sure. I can't remember, and I could look it up, but I'm not going to because I'm a bad booktuber, which is obviously a similar age to me now, though I'm not doing most of the things that these people are doing right now. I want to clarify, pretty much all of the things these people are doing, I'm not doing. I really like this book capturing the kind of like, you're still quite young at this age, and I'm not just saying that to kind of live my best life, but I think in terms of like the mistakes people make and the jealousy and the kind of like, in some ways acting in a way that we would probably describe as like acting like teenagers, but actually it's like acting like young people. And to be fair, adults like that way too. Which again, like the parallels within the book, it's interesting. And obviously these people with huge amounts of power in some cases and huge amounts of influence in others, and they're just sort of like getting caught up over boys and girls, and it's interesting. I really, really like it, and I'm still really stuck on the number of perspectives you get, because I'd remembered it as being maybe 4 point of view characters, but actually I don't know if this is like a conscious decision he's made, but it feels like Joe Abercrombie decides whose perspective is most interesting on this, and then quite often we'll go, okay, and what's the opposite of that, like who is the alternative here. So you do get to see an awful lot of sides of things, and characters disappear and then pop up again quite a bit later. So you do have to have a bit of a good memory for names, which, as we know, I'm very bad at, but I'm trying to get better, and this is definitely helping. Thank you for being here for my remembering names journey. I just thought it was a really solid story. It was much fewer battle scenes than I remembered. I don't know if that was because they're all in this one. Entirely possible. I really can't remember. It's Wednesday. I'm going to try and read 2/3 of this today, The Trouble with Peace. It's going to be great. And then we'll be on to The Wisdom of Crowds, which I don't actually know what happens. So we'll see. So stick around. We'll chat about that in just a bit. It is later in the day. In fact, it is the evening and I want to go for a run. So I've read up to the end of part 1 of The Trouble with Peace, but it is part 4 of the series because Joe Abercrombie has helpfully not given chapter numbers and has just split the books into 3 parts. 3 parts. I really hope Wisdom of Crowds is 3 parts. It would be really convenient for me. So my plan for Trouble with Peace is to read a part each time before I check in. It's pretty much bang on a third. Exciting. We're definitely still in the setup phase, same as we were for Little Hatred. Stuff hasn't quite exploded in any way, shape or form yet, but it obviously is about to. We've had some very dramatic character moments, like when you take where characters are at the start of Little Hatred, they're in a very different place now. But we are still dealing with some of that like folly of youth that I talked about before. I really am not liking Savine as much in this book as I was in the previous book, but I think that we're getting to the point where she's a bit more wily with some of the stuff that's going on with kind of manipulating the press and using her new husband to her advantage and that kind of thing. I think that's going to be very interesting to explore. I'm not expecting Savine to come out of this series particularly well. That's my prediction. And then Rika is going through some stuff, shall we say. I can't quite remember what happens to her in this book, so we'll see how that goes. And then the boys are being boys and doing their stuff and being fighty, and also sometimes like accidentally politically successful seems to be most of the time. I would say dumb luck is the answer to most of the problems in these books, more so than skill. This book is in some ways dealing with the aftermath of the first book, which is what we expect from a sequel in like a war politicsy kind of fantasy. But also I think it's more that the problems that happened in the first book, the reasons those things happened have not yet been fixed. And they're not going to be fixed, again, is my theory, because broadly speaking, this is following the Industrial Revolution and kind of how bad capitalism is. And I'm not really foreseeing this world turning into a utopia anytime soon. So yeah, I'm keeping on going with that. I don't know why I'm putting it back on the shelf. I'm going to pick it up after my run. I will say that it is going well. Trouble with Peace, slow start. Was there anything else I wanted to say? The only other thing I will say is I think it makes most sense to chain, however you want to phrase it, binge, whatever words you use for reading a series back to back, these, because I suck at names. And if you suck at names as well, you'll want to just keep reading, because you will forget who people are. Like, there are people who keep turning up, I'm like, I'm pretty sure you're from First Law, and I don't remember who you are, and I'm so sorry. So if you absolutely love First Law and you've read it multiple times, you probably won't have that problem. I have that problem. I can't remember who anyone is at any given time. I'm powering through these without reading anything else alongside, and that's going pretty well. Sorry, Angela. Our buddy read is stagnating because I'm doing this instead. I'll get back to it. Running, that's the plan. It's like 30 degrees. Why am I going for a run? What am I doing? Hello again. It is the 9th. Yeah, Thursday. I'm 2/3 of the way through The Trouble with Peace. I need to read The Trouble in Peace. I think this book is certainly slower than A Little Hatred. I just think it is. I think it's taken longer for anything to really happen because partly I think there's a lot more jumping about between places in this book, so there's less continuity of, okay, I'm just seeing two sides of the same conflict, but I'm in the same place and I'm following the same plot thread. Whereas in this, there's a lot more like, there's a conspiracy happening over here, and there's something going on over here, and this person's having an emotional quandary over here, right? So I think potentially the last third could be the most exciting part of this book. I think maybe it'll have shifted. I think the second half of A Little Hatred is better. I got a little bit bored, to be honest, in the middle of this section. I think it's partly just like churning through the same books over and over again. That naturally happens. But also, yeah, there's not a huge amount happening, but there's a lot of setup. So I'm excited for the last third. It's not like, oh no, this book is terrible, it was super boring, I was bored. It's more, there are stronger moments in a previous book and I know that, so I know this can go to more interesting places. Not to say there aren't exciting things happening, and the chapters where those things happen are the most exciting. So we have this section where there's a train explosion. I really love that bit. I think it's great. I think that the way that the chapter flits about between perspectives is really clever. And then for the rest of the time, I'm like, okay, we're having another discussion where you're clearly making a bad decision, and it does fit with your character, so I can't be angry that you're making that decision, but it is just happening again. I think if you look at like what these books are about, which is kind of war and also industry kind of thing, and the madness that those things are happening at the same time, I think that there are some really interesting things going on. And I think maybe if you look at it more broadly as conflict, a backstage view of that, or kind of through the fourth wall, if conflict were a play. This is a complicated metaphor, but I think that all of that stuff intersecting is really interesting. I'm just having a bit of like a, come on, let's get to the exciting things happening, which is, to be fair, how I felt in the first part of A Little Hatred. Again, putting this back here, gonna pick it up in a minute. It's slightly less warm today, which is good, but it's still really warm in my office, which is less good. So I shall see you later, probably sweaty again. There you go. Hello! It's not in frame, so I'll grab it. I finished The Trouble with Peace. Did I take all of my bookmarks and stuff out of it? I did not, but let's take a moment and appreciate end papers. I know this is just the dust jacket, but they've printed it into the end papers. And it's really pretty. Here was my pondering, because I will say the ending, very, very exciting. Probably the last 100 pages or so, I was like, okay, I'm back on board. And I think it's because of the structuring of the books. So, as I said this morning, whenever I talked about it, book 1 is parts 1, 2, 3. This is parts 4, 5, 6. So if this is being structured as one big narrative that just happens to be split into 3 books, potentially at the 3-part point, then this is the middle of the story, right? This is not only the second book in a series, but also if this were one giant book, this would be the middle. And that is sort of the most difficult bit to write, and the bit that is most easily boring. And I don't want to like slander all second books in series ever, but it's a known thing that often second books happen to be either less good or less exciting, or for whatever reason they just don't work as well. That's not true all the time. I have read some second books which I have loved the second one more than the first one. None are springing to mind, but I know that they've happened because I've talked about them on the channel before. In some ways, I think that the success or failure of this book depends on how the third one is, because if it is that it's the middle of the story and it's setting up a whole bunch of stuff that's all gonna again come toppling down in book 3, is that gonna happen? I think I would like this more if that is the case. If book 3 feels just more like this again, then it'll be a more disappointing end to the series. But having whinged about it for a while, I will say, like, in the spectrum of reading, this is a very good book. It's just in comparison to book 1, which I think is really solid, and I keep gesturing to it and it's not in frame, so just stellar work on my part there. I'm complaining, but I do really think that this is a great series, and I did really like a lot of aspects of this book. Towards the end, I think that Savine's plotline gets really interesting, and I haven't quite worked out what her angle on things is yet. Rika, who I've been calling Rika, it might be Ricky. I'm not 100% sure. At one point, someone called her Sticky Ricky, and I don't know if that was intentional or not. So yeah, Rika's doing some interesting things. She's taking power, and I don't know if that's going to go well for her. Again, I'm not 1,000% sure why she's done it, and if her only motivation is because she's annoyed at somebody else, then I don't know how I feel about that. Again, a lot of this is going to rely on how it plays out in the end for the characters that I'm really enjoying. I sort of came round to Leo. Not as much as I possibly should have done, but I sort of came round to Leo. Also he's not my favourite character. At no point in the series has he been, but I'll be interested to see how he handles things in the next book and whether he makes out of the next book alive. Vic, I think, is another character who's an opportunist, and I will still don't quite know which side Vic is on. And yeah, I'm interested. And future me, who is editing this, who will have finished all 3 books is probably looking back on this and being like, you foolish, simple child, you did not know that this was going to happen, and that's fair enough. I'm going to start The Wisdom of Crowds today. I'm going to try and do my usual and read a third of it by this evening. Tomorrow, my sister-in-law is coming to visit, so we're going to have to try and work pretty hard to finish it before she arrives, but I think it can be done. All around, I think book 1 is best so far, but I think that was the case beforehand, and I still think that you reading them together makes the most sense. If you read this like a year after reading the first one, you'd be heckin' confused, unless potentially you knew the first Law trilogy super well, so you weren't having to remind yourself of place names and things. Anyway, those are my thoughts. We've been going for a while, so I shall draw this to a close, and I'll see you in the next vlog clip. Hello, happy Friday. It's been a lot since I've said the happy days of the week thing. It's very rainy here in the UK today. I should probably shut that window, but I don't really want to, so I'm just watching it and hoping the rain doesn't go on my work laptop. It's going to be fine. Holding up my Kindle because it's time to talk about The Wisdom of Crowds. I finished part 1 of The Wisdom of Crowds. It's part 7 overall, because yes, I checked. This is split into 3 parts in the same way the other ones were. The little glass cells. My theory that this was going to feel like one big book when it was all done, that I talked about like for you 2 minutes ago, for me a fair while ago at this point, it was yesterday, is proving to be somewhat true, I think, because the first part of this book has been very exciting, to say the least. A lot has changed. I don't know whether to... am I going into spoilers in this? When is this going up? This is going up after the book comes out. I've decided it's going out on Thursdays. Yeah, exciting things. Hanging machines that seem fairly horrifying. People being thrown off buildings. A lot of revolution. This really feels like the end of Trouble with Peace. I don't quite know why. And I think it's because Trouble with Peace finishes with the battle, but not the aftermath of the battle. And I really wanted to know what was going to happen then. So I guess, like, arguably that's a cliffhanger ending, but for me, I'm very glad that I got to read the 3rd one straight afterwards this time around. So yeah, it really, really did feel like a continuation proper. If this had been in this book, I wouldn't have been surprised. I mean, that would have made Wisdom of Crowds fairly short. I don't know how I feel about, and I'll be interested to see how it comes out in the wash. The kind of powerful, ambitious woman has baby changes her entirely. And I don't think, because I have faith that Joe Abercrombie wouldn't do this. I have concerns at this point. I don't know that it's going to happen, and I think Sabine's motivations have shifted, but her way of dealing with problems may not have done, which is, I think I would appreciate. I don't think it's going to be, I've had children, and now I'm good now, and I won't do anything wrong, and I shall give everything away and be just happy being a mum, and that's all fine, because I don't love that. So we'll see what happens there. What else is happening on? I'm pretty sure it's Ricky, but Ricky just makes me think of like a teen boy in like a Disney Channel original movie, so I'm going to keep going with Ricka because it makes me feel better inside. But just know that when I say Ricka, it is Ricky. She's just doing stuff. I don't 100% know that I agree with all the things she's doing, but you know, that can be said for most characters in this series. A lot of how I feel about her character is going to come on to how she deals with stuff towards the end. Also, I'm finding much more interesting in this book, observer of things that are happening, and I suppose also was always a bit of a reluctant monarch and always saw the problems with the monarchy as much as you can when you're inside that position of privilege. And now seeing both the problems with the monarchy and the problems with whatever this is now is really interesting. And I know I said that I didn't think this book was going to turn into communism, but like, maybe? I'm very much enjoying it. I'm excited to try and finish it today. I will hopefully get back to you tomorrow with some thoughts and some feelings and some outro, and we'll get to editing and have this up. It will go up after the update. So if you have thought about reading Wisdom of Crowds and you don't want to be spoiled for the rest of it, you can buy a copy now and come back when you're done. Right, on with the day. So I am 2/3 of the way through the Wisdom of Crowds. I will put the cover up because I am snazzy. This is going very well. Second part, as thrilling as part 1, very exciting. Really loving watching various plans come together. Some plans topple. There are things that have been set up that I'm now like, oh, in hindsight, I should have realised that was happening, which is really good because I really like to be surprised by a book. Don't get me wrong, I love to know absolutely everything about what's happening and guess what's going to happen, but this is good. I like getting a bit of like, oh, right, that was what was going on there. Makes sense. So yeah, I'm having a good time with that. I think particularly Ricky's plot. I've come around. There were too many references to Sticky Ricky and Picky Ricky, and yeah, okay, fine. It's Ricky from high school. Everything seems to be coming to a head. Like, I don't know where this is going to go in the last 100 pages. I'm intrigued by that fact because I don't think everything can be solved. And I'm not expecting everything to be solved. This is a Joe Abercrombie book, right? We're not expecting solutions to everyone's problems and a happy ending for all. But in terms of like resolution, it'll be interesting to see where this book goes and what the catharsis is. Like at this point, if it ends in a nuclear explosion and everyone dies and that's the end, I wouldn't be that surprised, because that's the only way I can think to end this in a way that feels like done. Savine continues to have this not strange change of heart. Like it makes sense when I think about it. It's just not what I was expecting, which is why I keep feeling like the other shoe's gonna drop. Like, so she'll be bad, not bad again, but you know what I mean? Like she'll revert back, but maybe I'm not giving her enough credit as a character. I don't know. And yeah, plots and plans being put in place. It is doing one of my favourite things, which is if you asked me at the end of book 1, 2 days ago, did I think this was where we would get to? I don't think I would have said yes. Partly because I couldn't remember what happened in book 2, but also because interesting stuff is going on and characters are making choices that still make sense for their character, but that are interesting. So yeah, I'm going to keep going with it. We shall see how everything concludes in part 9. I don't know what to say. I finished the series. In theory, I'm pretty sure. Like, if there is another book, I haven't heard about it. And somebody on the Goodreads page said it was just a trilogy, so let's assume so. I really enjoyed that ending. I really liked it as the end of a trilogy. I really liked where most of the characters got to in terms of their character journeys, I guess is probably the best way to say it, because it's not always character development. Sometimes it's just a character being in a different place. I've just finished, like 30 seconds ago finished it, and my brain is firing in all directions thinking about, oh, and that happened to that person, that's really interesting based on where they were at the start of A Little Hatred. I did have a good few moments of, oh, of course that's how that happened. Of course that's who the Weaver is, primarily, because, I'm not going to say it here because just in case you've left this running, I don't want to reveal that, but it makes so much sense, and I'm so annoyed that I didn't realise it, and the kind of implied afterwards of the book, like almost a sequel hook, but not quite. Just a good stuff. I feel like I've really focused in on Ricky for a lot of this vlog, and that's because I think her character's really cool and she's the most interesting for me personally. But I actually really found also really interesting, especially if you look at how the book kind of not pits them against each other as a series, but like Orso and Leo are both male leads in this story, I guess is the simplest way to summarize it. And their kind of different endings and what happens to them is really fascinating, where their characters are by the end of it. It's not even character driven. I don't think I would describe this as character driven fantasy. It's just character fantasy. Like, this is about these people in this war, and I think what really brings it home for me is the few chapters that there's a couple of them that are called Little People, or The Little People. I can't remember if there's a "the" in there, but they look at whatever's happening through the eyes of various characters who aren't the characters we've been following, who aren't necessarily the characters who've made the decision for these things to happen, and it just really brings it all home for how the little things that these big characters are doing is having an impact. Blimey, that was a good time. If you've watched this and you haven't read these and you've just spoiled yourself because maybe you were thinking like, I'll never get around to it. Get round to it. These are wonderfully written. Like, in terms of plot, fantastic, but the actual writing of them is really good. Joe Abercrombie can write a book. He can craft a narrative if you get on with his style of writing. I know some people don't, and I think that there's elements of his world and grimdark as a genre in particular that some people just don't get on with, and that's fine. And don't force yourself to read this if you'd really rather be reading something cozy. I was in a place right now where I could stand some kind of gritty fantasy, partly because it's been so warm. I like to spend a lot of time in a fictional frozen north. But if you're pondering giving Joe Abercrombie a go, and you weren't as keen on First Law, I think that this is a really good series to read. Now, First Law is probably useful to read at some point alongside this. If you can read it first, I think you have a better reading experience of this series. But you could read this and then read First Law after getting a grip of it. I just think this is slightly more accessible, and I don't know if that's just because there are more female characters. Potentially. Possibly my reasoning. But that was how I felt anyway. I read A Little Hatred, and then I read First Law Trilogy, and then I came back and I've reread them since. Really, really solid. Just great work. I have really enjoyed making this vlog though. I haven't touched the editing of it. I've been putting some of the clips together, matching up the audio and stuff, and I think this is going to be long, so if you have stuck it out this far, thank you for joining me. I hope that this has been insightful in some way, shape or form. I can't remember anything I've said. I think I just talked about how sweaty I am for most of it, so thanks. Have you read these? Are you planning to? I really hope you have read these if you've made it this far, because I will have spoiled things for you if that's not the case. I know I still have to read the standalones, and I'm really excited to get to read them. I think I will be ordering copies of them in October, probably, just based on my book budget, because this was most of my book budget for September. But worth it. I'm glad that I pre-ordered Wisdom of Crowds so that I can plonk them all together. Maybe they'll go just here. Sorry, She Who Became the Sun. You can go there as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you have read these, let me know what your favourite book in the series was, what your favourite Joe Abercrombie is, what your favourite grimdark is. Just give me some insight into what your thoughts are. I would love to know. While you're down there commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You could also follow me on all of my social media. Come hang out on Discord. We have nice chats about books with nice people. Also, this was a completely different way of doing a reading vlog that I'd not done before. So if you enjoyed this, please do let me know, because I need to know whether I should do it for some other things. Most significantly, Jade, the Greenbone saga. The third one's coming out for that. Maybe we could do this for this as well. You know what I mean. Oh no, everything's going wrong. I need to stop. Bye-bye. It's gonna be some bloopers now. Did we need to drive past at this exact moment in time? I don't think we did. Oh no, have I now lost where I was? Well, we'll find it again later. It's Wednesday, I'm going to try and read... Whoa. Hi. Oh, see, I create a specific filming area and I still can't frame it right. Oh, come back to me, brain. So yeah, Stop the audio.